Fernando Alonso, Hungary 2007. During qualifying for McLaren, Alonso and his teammate Lewis Hamilton were locked in a tense internal battle. In Q3, Alonso stopped in the pit box for several extra seconds, just long enough to prevent Hamilton from getting one final flying lap. Alonso secured pole position, but the FIA wasn't having it. They handed him a grid penalty, and things only got worse for the team. That same season, McLaren was disqualified from the Constructors' Championship altogether. The reason? Spygate. Someone inside the team had Ferrari's entire playbook. Literally, it's 2008. Singapore Grand Prix, Alonso took the win, which seemed like a great result, until the truth came out. His teammate had crashed on purpose, triggering a safety car that played perfectly into Alonso's pit strategy. It was victory by design, but not in the way fans hoped. The scandal forced the FIA to ban pre-planned crashes, as if that needed to be a rule in the first place. But then, just when F1 seemed to settle into routine, Brawn GP happened. In 2009, Ross Brawn bought out Honda's F1 team and entered the season with a car equipped with a double diffuser, a clever aerodynamic device that delivered massive downforce. It was legal technically, only because the rulebook didn't explicitly forbid it. While rival teams protested, the FIA ruled it acceptable, albeit reluctantly. By the time the regulations caught up, Brawn GP had already swept both championships and secured a billion-dollar deal with Mercedes. It was a masterclass in innovation, brilliant, bold, and completely within the grey area of the rules. Brawn GP's dominance lasted just one season, but the impact on the sport's regulations was permanent. Prost versus Senna. Suzuka, 1989. Ayrton Senna goes for a bold move into the chicane. Alain Prost closes the door. They crash. Senna restarts his car, rejoins the track, and crosses the finish line first. It looks like his title dream is still alive, until the FIA steps in. You cut the chicane. Disqualified. Championship gone. The racing world is stunned. Fast forward 1 year, same place, same high stakes. Suzuka 1990. This time, Senna's not taking any chances. At the very first corner, he doesn't lift off the throttle. Prost turns in, expecting space. They crash again, both out immediately. Senna wins the championship right there, in the gravel. No debates, no appeals, just shock, anger, and a title decided in one brutal moment. When they were teammates at McLaren in 1988 and 1989, the team had the two best drivers in the world, and also the most explosive rivalry. Senna was faster in qualifying. Prost hit back with experience, pressure, and influence. Their battle wasn't just for race wins, it was for control, respect, legacy. Their collisions weren't just racing incidents. They were messages, lines drawn in carbon fiber, and every time, the FIA had to react. After 1989, they introduced rules about cutting corners and rejoining the track. After 1990, new rules came in to prevent dangerous driving and blocking. And somewhere along the way, a quiet message spread through the paddock. Don't drive like Senna. But here's the thing, none of it stopped them. They pushed each other so hard they forced Formula One to change. They showed that raw talent and cold strategy could clash in ways no one had seen before. And the sport, it had to grow up fast. Because Prost and Senna didn't just race each other, they changed the way Formula One worked on the track, in the rulebook, and in the history books. Juan Manuel Fangio. Juan Manuel Fangio was the godfather of doing whatever the hell he wanted. In the 1950s, he didn't just win, he collected world titles, 5 of them to be exact. All while casually hopping between Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, Mercedes and Maserati. Sometimes, he'd even switch teams mid-season like it was no big deal. The FIA didn't stop him, mostly because they were still trying to figure out how to spell regulation, let alone enforce one. Fangio negotiated race-by-race deals, drove whatever car was fastest that week, and still came out on top. There was even a point where he crashed, dislocated his neck, and still wanted to race. The FIA's reaction, a shrug and maybe we should invent a rule for that. And then, of course, nah, maybe later. But if Senna, Prost and Fangio gave the FIA a headache, then Michael Schumacher gave them a full-blown existential crisis. Let's set the scene. Mid-90s to mid-2000s. Ferrari basically builds a red spaceship, and Schumacher pilots it to title after title with the precision of a machine and the ruthlessness of a man who never asked for permission. But it wasn't just the speed that rattled the paddock, it was his creative interpretation of fair play that sent the FIA into panic mode. It started in 1994, Adelaide. Schumacher crashes into Damon Hill in the title decider. Michael's car is done. Hill tries to carry on, but his suspension is wrecked. The result? Schumacher wins the championship. The FIA's response, we should maybe talk about intentional collisions? Fast forward to 1997, Jerez. Another title showdown, this time against Jacques Villeneuve. Schumacher tries the same move, but Villeneuve holds on, finishes the race, and Schumacher ends up in the gravel. The FIA finally says, okay, that was a bit too obvious. So what do? They disqualify Schumacher from the season standings. Not the races, just the championship, because logic. And that was just the opening act. Enter the early 2000s, the Ferrari era, a period of total domination layered in controversy. Take Austria 2002, Rubens Barrichello is comfortably leading, then comes the call, let Michael through. Rubens literally breaks before the finish line and hands the win to Schumacher. The crowd boos, the podium is a PR disaster, and the sport loses a piece of its soul. The FIA responds by banning team orders. More on that later. Then came Monaco 2006. Schumacher's on provisional pole during qualifying. Suddenly he locks up at Rascasse and accidentally parks his car on the racing line. The session is disrupted. Nobody else can finish their laps. Suspicious? Definitely. The FIA investigates, finds it deliberate, and strips him of pole. Everyone else is still fuming. Michael was an apex predator, and at times a full-on Bond villain. He'd park in qualifying. He'd block Fernando Alonso in the pit lane at Hungary 2010. He'd defend his position like he was sealing a bank vault during a heist. Every time, the FIA would quietly shuffle in a new regulation. No more dangerous blocking, no more fake mechanical failures, no more refueling tricks. Speaking of refueling, remember when Ferrari would short fuel Schumacher just to get him track position, then rely on him to pump out a string of ridiculous qualifying laps mid-race? Legal. Genius. Also, a tactical nightmare for actual racing. Eventually, that loophole got closed too. See the pattern? Michael didn't just play the game, he rewrote it in real time. And every time the FIA patched one loophole, he found another. He wasn't cheating, he was optimizing. He was turning motorsport into a game of regulatory chess, and the FIA was always 2 moves behind. Schumacher forced the sport to think differently, to evolve, to build a rulebook thick enough to keep up with a man who never stopped pushing every limit, written or unwritten. He was the boss level. And if you wanted to beat him, you didn't just need the best car or the best driver, you also needed a damn good lawyer. Now we enter the Red Bull engineering era, also known as Adrian Newey's Book of Forbidden Techniques. This was the age where innovation danced on the edge of legality, and Red Bull led the charge with a car that looked fast and read the rulebook like a lawyer. First up, the exhaust-blown diffuser. It used hot exhaust gases to create extra downforce by literally gluing the car to the ground. Was it illegal? Not exactly. The rules didn't say, don't do that, so Red Bull did it. The FIA eventually stepped in. You can't map the engine to do that intentionally. Red Bull replied, oops, our bad. New map, totally different, same effect. Then came the flexi wings, parts of the car that passed all static tests but conveniently flexed at high speed to reduce drag and boost straight line pace. Again, technically legal, until the FIA rewrote the tests to catch them in the act. And of course, the infamous party modes, special engine settings used just for qualifying. Red Bull made it famous, Mercedes ran with it later, and everyone else just watched from behind. The FIA, in classic fashion, reacted not with innovation, but with a ban, because nothing screams sportsmanship like outlawing something right after someone figures out how to win with it. This was a golden age of cleverness, loopholes, and regulatory whack-a-mole. The smartest teams didn't just build fast cars, they built legal fast cars, crafted to exploit every inch of what the rules didn't say. The FIA, meanwhile, spent most of the era playing catch-up. One minute they were testing wings with weight, the next they were measuring fuel flow, inspecting plank wear, or panicking over diffuser angles. The upgrades Red Bull brought to the track looked less like racing parts and more like technical grey areas weaponized. It got so ridiculous that rules started bleeding into everything. Change a gearbox? That's a grid penalty. Celebrate too hard and lose a bit too much fuel? Sorry, no sample equals disqualified. Set your ride height too low? Illegal. Unless the rule hadn't been updated that week and you were Red Bull. So what did we learn from this era? F1 isn't just about being fast, it's about being fast within the rules, as defined by a 1,000-page document being rewritten every time someone wins too smartly. Red Bull didn't just race, they engineered around the system, and in doing so, they proved that in Formula 1, intelligence might just be the ultimate performance enhancer. Max Verstappen. He broke the concept of what the rules were even supposed to mean. We're talking about a driver so aggressive, so completely unbothered by racing etiquette, that the FIA basically had to open a live stewarding patch notes channel just to keep up. Let's rewind to early Verstappen. Teenager. Toro Rosso. No fear, zero filter. In 2016, he starts weaving while defending, especially under braking. Other drivers complain, the stewards panic, and the FIA stares at the rulebook like, wait, do we even have something on that? Their solution? Right, maybe we should write something about changing direction under braking. Boom, new rule. Congrats, Max. You literally invented a regulation just by being too spicy on the brakes. Fast forward to 2021. Verstappen versus Hamilton, the greatest title fight in years. An entire season written like a high-budget soap opera, filmed at 300 kilometers per hour. Brazil, Max runs Lewis off the track. No penalty. Saudi Arabia, brake tests him on a straight, 5-second penalty, 2 license points. Abu Dhabi, yeah, we're going there. Lewis dominates, Latifi crashes, safety car deployed. Then Michael Masi rewrites the ending like he's directing Drive to Survive in real time. Verstappen wins. Twitter melts down. Mercedes files protest. The FIA looks around, realizes the rulebook doesn't cover last lap chaos written by committee, and panics. The result? Masi gets sacked. The rules for safety cars get rewritten. Race control gets split between 2 people and starts using a rotating schedule, like it's a part-time job now. But Verstappen's driving was just the tip of the storm. The real problem was how the FIA reacted, with vague rules, inconsistent penalties, and the very public vibe of, we're kind of making this up as we go. The Verstappen effect isn't about cheating, it's about pressure testing the entire regulatory system until it cracks. He forced the FIA to define things they'd been letting slide for decades: when you're allowed to defend, how many moves you get, what forcing off track really means, and how not to brake test someone on live TV with every camera in the world watching. And let's be honest, whether you loved the drama or hated it, Verstappen exposed the gaps in the system better than any hired consultant ever could. He didn't ask for the rules to change, he just made it impossible not to. All by driving the way every 14-year-old on PlayStation thinks they should drive, and somehow making it work. Once upon a time there were rules. Clear, written, predictable. Now, there are technical directives, clarifications, whispers in paddocks, unwritten expectations, and the ultimate wildcard. We'll discuss it after the race. Welcome to modern F1, where something can be totally legal in Bahrain, borderline in Baku, and banned outright by the time the circus hits Melbourne, because someone did it too well the last time out. Lewis Hamilton. When he was winning, Formula One looked like a perfectly tuned machine. But when he pushed too hard, on track, off track, in the paddock, or in the press, it almost always led to new rules, emergency meetings, and a few sleepless nights in Paris. Let's start with 2016 Spain. Lap 1, Hamilton and teammate Nico Rosberg crash into each other, both cars out. Mercedes loses its mind. They pull both drivers aside and basically say, do that again, and one of you is fired. From that moment on, intra-team freedom at Mercedes came with a leash. The racing continued, but now under a microscope. Fast forward to 2021, Silverstone. Hamilton versus Verstappen. Cops corner, they touch. Max flies into the barrier at 51 Gs. Hamilton gets a 10-second penalty and still wins the race. The paddock erupts. Suddenly, time penalties aren't enough. Debates explode on Sky Sports, Twitter, and every garage wall. The FIA scribbles down some notes and starts thinking, maybe we should revisit how we handle race-ending collisions. But then came Abu Dhabi, the final round of 2021. Lewis is leading. A late crash triggers a safety car. Michael Masi, under pressure, changes the usual restart procedure on the fly. Verstappen wins the title. Mercedes protests. The FIA stares at its own rulebook and realizes, wow, we should have written this part in ink. Masi gets removed. The entire race direction system is torn apart and rebuilt. Safety car rules are rewritten, procedures are clarified. Abu Dhabi didn't just end a season, it rebooted the sport. But it wasn't just the major moments. In 2022, out of nowhere, the FIA resurrects an old regulation, the jewelry ban. Yes, jewelry. Hamilton, known for his earrings and nose stud, suddenly becomes public enemy number 1 for wearing accessories he's worn for years. The rule had existed forever. No one enforced it. Until now. Why? Because Hamilton was still the sport's most visible figure, and the FIA decided to flex. He pushed back, showed up to press conferences with more jewelry. The FIA doubled down, eventually fined him, then forced compliance. It was never really about safety, it was about control. Then came 2023, the Great Track Limits crackdown. Hamilton's driving style has always flirted with the edge, and sometimes just over it. The FIA noticed, fans noticed, so they installed more sensors, more cameras, more automatic flag systems. Track limits became the new villain of the grid. Lap times deleted, podiums lost, races decided by a few millimeters of asphalt. All because drivers like Lewis pushed the line too consistently, and the FIA had to draw one in response. 2024 brought the radio silence. Hamilton has always been a master of communication, talking through strategy, car settings, and conditions mid-race. But the FIA decided that was too much coaching, so they limited what teams could say. Suddenly, engineers had to shut up. Drivers had to figure things out alone. Why? Because Hamilton had turned the team radio into a tactical weapon, and now that door was being slammed shut. And just when it looked like he might have mellowed out, came 2025, Spain. Now wearing Ferrari red, Hamilton collides with his teammate, double DNF, Ferrari spirals. The media goes into meltdown. And just like that, Flashbacks to 2016 Mercedes. The question rises again. Should there be stricter rules for racing teammates? Answer, probably. Follow-up, why does this keep happening with Lewis? Over 2 decades, Hamilton didn't just race, he reshaped the sport. He made the FIA rewrite. Team orders, safety car protocols, dual reinforcement, radio communications, track limits, race director responsibilities, and more. The FIA didn't always act quickly, but when Lewis Hamilton forced the issue, they had no choice. Because every time he stepped out of the car, he sparked a new conversation about fairness, about freedom, and about where exactly the line between racing and regulation should be drawn. So here's the truth. In Formula 1, being great isn't the end game. It's being so great the entire sport hits pause and goes, okay, this is getting out of hand. Every driver we've talked about didn't just win races, they bent the rules, stretched them, exposed where they didn't exist yet, and they were too smart, too fast, too bold, too good at making the FIA panic at 3 a.m. with a new PDF to send. And so the rules came, after Fangio's dominance, after Senna's rage, after Michael's precision crimes, after Alonso's drama, after Max's chaos, after Lewis kept turning the rulebook into a choose-your-own-adventure novel. F1 doesn't hate genius, it just doesn't trust it. So if they write a rule because of you, take a bow. You didn't just race, you changed the game.